We love your questions. Any question you can give us it gives us something to gives us a chance to answer the question, but it also tells us what you're interested in. So we had several customer or client questions that came in, and Eric, you're here to help me out. What's our first question?
Yeah. So first question comes from Facebook, Joe, and the question is, can you teach on some steps to improve at radio calls?
Yes, radio calls. Before we launch into radio calls, let me just say it's probably the most feared, and it also distinguishes somebody from being the most professional.
Yeah.
So feared meaning the new people that enter into this market, or into aviation. There's something about talking on the radio that it's just scary.
Right. And I think I experienced that when I was doing my private pilot license. The radio was the hardest part to learn.
Yes.
Because it's different.
And there's something, when you talk about speaking in public or you're just putting yourself out there, it's people say that they're more scared of that than they are of death. I mean, which sounds crazy to me, but it's true. And in that respect, people are just truly fearful of publicly speaking. And there's nothing like hitting the radio, squeezing the trigger, and you're putting whatever you got out there.
No idea how many thousands of people are hearing you, or hundreds of people, whatever that number is. It's a lot.
It's a lot. And,
a lot of people
and if you look at the people that can listen to live ATC, you can go back and listen to the recording. So, but there's a fear that comes across there that people just get scared of that. So getting good at the radio calls really is going to be something that's going to help you fly better, because this big hairy green monster's not going to be something that's going to come eat you. You're going to defeat this big monster is going to turn into a little mouse. Does that make sense? In other words, which is going to allow you to do the flying part better. So if you can get good at your radio calls, it's going to help immensely. Second thing, it differentiates you between, like if I go flying with a client and they just nail their radio calls, they're just doing really, really good. My opinion of them is elevated at that point. In other words, they're a more professional pilot. Or if I listen to a professional pilot out there talking and he's just butchering things, I'm like, what a rookie. In other words, how you come across on the radio is important. And it's important that it be professional, but it's more important that somebody practices to get it right. Not that they just sound like with the colloquialisms and things of this nature. It's getting it right, having the right order, having the right way of sounding is important.
Taking out excess words, that's one that a lot of new pilots tend to struggle with, is using excess language that's not required.
Brevity is important.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Clarity and brevity are probably your two biggest ones, but that you're searching for in a broadly, when you're just talking about radio calls, you want brevity and clarity is two big ones. But the other one is learning what those radio calls are and how they're going to come. And so the first thing that I would say is there's certain calls that you need to know the sequence of the prescribed call. So let me give you an example. A hold. Like if I hold, like most of the time, ATC is not going to come out and say, November 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hold south of the blah, 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 and give you they're going to say, I have holding instructions, be prepared to copy, or, advise when ready to copy. And that gives you a chance to okay, I'm going to pull out my pen and be ready to write. And then you say, I'm ready to write. And then they give you the hold that comes. Well, knowing what that sequence is going to sound like. So on a hold, they're going to say hold and give you a cardinal direction. Hold south of the XYZ VOR on the 180 radial. And then they're going to give the altitude at 4,000 feet, and then expect further clearance. So it's direction, hold south on the whatever position, altitude, and then expect further clearance. When you know those four things are coming on the hold call, it makes you better to be able to. So when I'm writing things down, I'm writing those four things. Southeast or south of the XYZ of VOR, this altitude, EFC at blah, blah, blah. When I know those four things are coming to me, I get better at it. And then calling it back is easier too, because you know what those sequences are. I'll give you another one. Vectors for final. Oh my gosh, this is one that people butcher all the time. Again, a 4-part call that's going to come to you. They're going to say the first part is how far you are away from the final approach fix. So you're 6 miles from Airby or whatever the final approach fix. Turn left to a heading whatever. maintain this altitude, clear for the approach. So there's the 4. Direction from the fix, heading to turn 2, altitude to go to, cleared for the approach. 4 things. So when you give that call back, it's going to sound a little bit different. You're not going to give all 4 of those, but you can say something. The call I always give is heading to join, altitude to establish, clear for the approach. So it's 3 things that go back. Turn heading 180 to join, maintain 2000 to establish, clear for the approach, or cleared for the ILS 18 or whatever
they give you.
Correct. Exactly. But knowing the 4 things are coming and being able to give that call back in that, whatever heading, whatever altitude, clear for the approach, you give that back, you sound professional. But you need to know the sequence of those. Let me give you another one that everybody does on every flight that's IFR is initial contact. So you're not talking to somebody. In other words, your tower clears you for takeoff, or you take off from an uncontrolled field, and you're going to talk to your first radar facility. It's your first chance to get it right, especially if you're on an instrument check ride. And that's always what heading you're on and what altitude you're going through, too. So it's Longview approach. This is Cessna 12345 on a heading 120, climbing through 2,000 for 3,000. Done. And that's your initial So knowing what that first radio call is going to be will really help you out immensely.
Yeah, that's good insight. I do have a kind of a sub question to this, and it comes from flying in different countries.
Yeah.
When you go to like Canada, for example, they do things a little different, or Eastern Canada, a lot of French radio calls and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
How do you handle radio calls in different areas?
Yeah, if I go all over the world, and there's certain places where English is used everywhere, but English is not always used everywhere. So what I mean by, like, if you go to French Canada, I mean anywhere around Montreal or eastbound, French is they're just very passionate about their French language, which is great. But you go over there, 50 to 60% of what's on the radio is going to be French. And when you come on the radio as English, they'll switch over to English for you. In other words, people begin to start figuring out, in other words, they're not so like, you need to go learn French. They're more along the lines of, we want to help out, but we'd rather talk French.
So you just find a gap and go.
Find a gap and jump in there and start speaking English. They'll figure out, hey, I'm a dude that speaks English. Let me give another one, China. Go to China, and it is, I'm so glad that we don't have Chinese as the international language of aviation, or I don't know what we would do.
You're right.
But they have to learn our language, which is, it's really hard for them. So when you go over there, there's a lot of Chinese going on. Of course, I have no clue what they're saying. But the minute I come on with English, then they shift over to English. A lot of times it's butchered. A lot of times it's not perfectly clear. I'm very careful to be very clear, and brevity goes out the window. But clarity is important then. So I'm speaking in a way where they understand it.
Gotcha. And what would you say to that guy who's maybe doing their private pilot license and learning the best way to learn how to begin talking on the radio? Because for me, it always felt like I was lost. Like I didn't know what to say, and I got so lost in trying to make the right radio call that I forget what I'm doing and flying the airplane.
A good CFI and chair flying. Literally where we're sitting right here, and okay, you're on left down one. What do you do? Okay, and you practice making that radio call. The other one, especially if you go to a flight school or somewhere where there's other pilots, get into a room and just start talking that back and forth. And somebody will know how it's supposed to sound, and you just practice making that even so. The picture of the World War II pilot where they're kind of doing like this, and they're kind of maneuvering their body and practicing the maneuvers they're about to do. It's the same thing where you can almost literally, okay, this is the runway, and I'm on left downwind. I'm going to make this radio call, and then I'm on base. I'm going to make, what I'm saying? And work it and begin to practice. Absolutely valuable.
Yeah, that's awesome. I saw the other day, there's now an app that you can go, all right, I'm taking off. What radio call do I make? And you can practice, and you can go back and check, did I make the right radio call? Or I'm getting an instrument approach, or getting an instrument clearance. What do I say? And so you can go and practice through an app, and it'll coach you and correct you.
Correct.
It's kind of neat.
Yeah. Hey, can I give you another one that's really good? is ATC has to give you a radio, like if you're changing frequencies and they're going to give you a frequency, they have to say, contact somebody on 123.45. That's how they'll say it. In other words, contact long view approach 128.75. But if you come back and say, contact long view approach on 128.75, you're probably going to mess it up. And the reason why there's 5 numbers, somewhere, I don't know why, the brain just doesn't do odd numbers well. It's just, there's a bunch of them and you kind of mess things up. The best way to do it is understand that the 1 is
always there.
So you don't need to say it back. And then you group the other 2 into groups of 2. So if it's 128.75, instead of saying contact long view approach on 128.75, group them, drop the 1, and then go 28.75.
Yeah.
So 28.75 for Cessna 12345. Good day.
Much easier to remember.
Yes.
And it flows off the tongue faster, and then you don't lose excess digits.
Well, again, it's the way the brain works. That the brain, when you go 28.75, you're not memorizing 5 numbers or 4 numbers. You're reading back effectively 2 numbers. Because 28.75, does that make sense?
It does.
And it works so much better. So 28.75 for Cessna 12345, good day. And so dropping the 1 makes it so. And I'll hear even some people here, or hear some people say, contact them 128.75. That's even worse because decimal, you're putting 3
extra syllables.
Bingo.
That's it.
Bingo.
It's
You're
confusing.
not trying to memorize this long term. You're trying to put it, and I'll give you another trick right there. When you're putting that, when they call you and say, Cessna 12345, contact long view approach on 128.75. Well, that's a lot. They're talking. They're going to give you they say word contact. Your hand ought to go to that knob, right? It ought to be this is a major faux pas that I see pilots do all the time. If your hand will go right there and make that hand work that knob while you're talking with the other hand. In other words, you're literally squeezing with the left hand. 128.75, and you may not be able to get it in there in that time, but you're working towards that.
What about on the transponder? I kind of tend to go to the transponder when I know they're going to give me a squawk code and I'm ready to press something.
Yes, and I don't put it on a piece of paper. I go right to the transponder, 4076 or, whatever the number, whatever and sometimes transponders are not as easy. Like if you have a Garmin 345 transponder, it has digits on the front.
Rubber buttons are easy, tactile,
boom, boom,
easy
boom.
to punch.
Yep, and I do it. But like if you have a G1000, where you got to go hit the transponder thing, hit the code, hit the, what I'm saying? It's not quite as easy. It takes a little bit longer, and you can usually listen to somebody that whenever the ATC says, hey, I got a new transponder code, it's 3073, whatever it happens to be, you can sense the delay in their voice as
3, 0, 7,
yes,
3.
and it's okay, but it's better if you go 3073 while you're in there with that. Right. There's a practice of making your hand work while your mind is doing another thing, and it works out well. But one of the faux pas I see pilots do all the time is that they'll get a frequency, let's say 128.75, and they'll go 128.75, and they call it back, but their hand's not on the radio, and then whenever they do end up going there, they forgot. They screwed it up, or what I'm saying? But if you'll do it right then, it's just so much better. And then one more, I hate to just nail this one, but the other one is when they say 128.75, I have a lot of pilots that'll write that down. Now, I don't have a problem writing things down. I'm okay generally sometimes, but most of the time I don't like it. Now, here's the reason why. When they write it down on the piece of paper, sometimes it doesn't end up into the system. In other words, they got an action required. They performed an action by writing it down on the piece of paper.
Mentally, it's complete.
That's right.
Yeah,
and they
makes sense.
Didn't actually put it in.
One more question on this one. Talking about when you clear, 10,000. People say 10,500. What are your thoughts on that? When you say or 13,400. What are your thoughts on that? Because that does add extra words in.
But it's the right way to do it.
Right.
Yeah. If you're at 15,000, you'll hear some people say, I'm at 15.3 for flight level 180. And 15.3, does that work? Yes. Generally, it's not right. Okay. It is brief. And ATC, I've never heard ATC come back and say, hey, say that right. I've never heard that. It is a little rookie. In other words, it's better to say 15,300 climbing 180 for, King Air 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Got it.
That's the more professional and better. I've never heard anybody squawk it back and say it's wrong. Because 15.3, you get it, but it's
And you also don't hear, you rarely hear ATC making corrections to people. They just, if they get the information they need, they just kind of.
And if they don't get the information they need, they ask you for it. If they ever have to come back to you and say, what was that altitude or something along this line, not because they misheard it, but because they didn't get it, that tells you screwed up that radio call, and you go figure out why you did.
And they have to get the right information because there's safety involved.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, let's continue on. Unless you have anything else on radio calls.
I got a couple more things.
Let's do it.
Yeah, it won't take me long though. There's a couple things that always and forever have to be read back, and here's the way you remember that: any hold short. So if you hold short of whatever runway, taxiway, you have to read that back, and a number other than winds. So if you remember that, any number other than winds has to go back to them. So if they say hold short of runway 36, it's hold short of runway 36. If you just say, we're holding short, Cessna 12345, ATC is going to come back to you and say, hold short of 36. Right. If you're clear for takeoff on runway 18, you have to say clear for takeoff runway 18, not just clear for takeoff.
What if you just say clear for takeoff 18?
That's it. That's
Are they
fine.
going to be mad if you say runway? Like extra words like that? Are they ever?
No one's going
to
say a word to you about that. No. If you come back and go clear for takeoff 18 for Cessna 12345, I would call that not rookie. I would call that intermediate, because a pro is going to say runway 18.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
It does.
You're above the rookie stage, but it's not perfect. But no one's going to come back and say, "Hey, you didn't say the word runway." But if you remember that in your radio calls, every number not counting winds and every hold short, you have to call back. That'll get you 95% down the road.
Yeah, that's a great rule of thumb just to keep in mind for those that are learning to do these radio calls and learning to clean up and learning to become that professional on the radio.
Yeah, and there's one other that I would tell, especially to instrument pilots that are aspiring to come from the instrument range. I can guarantee there's going to be some place in that check ride that I'm going to ask the question, what are the additional reports as listed in the AIM, Aeronautical Information Manual? And the answer is that those are the reports that you have to give back to AC or give to ATC without a specific ATC request. So, in other words, these are things that ATC is not saying, hey, what's your heading? And you give them your heading. Or, hey, what's your altitude? You give them your altitude. This is something you have to give them without a specific ATC request. So one of them is like entering or leaving a holding fix. So when you enter that holding fix, you need to give that radio call. Hey, I'm entering the holding fix at 4,000 at XYZ VOR or whatever the case may be. That's a required call. Unable to climb, like in the PA-46 world, you got the pistons out there, and you get above flight level 180, all the pistons are climbing at 500 feet a minute, maybe. And if you can't climb at 500 feet a minute, guess what? That's a radio call. And it could be as simple as Malibu 12345. We're going to be a slow climb up to 230. And that lets them know, hey, I'm going to be a slow climb, because they're expecting you to climb at a minimum of 500 feet a minute. Or you could say, hey, can I get discretion on the climb up to 180 or something of this nature? That lets them know. But probably the one that's violated the most of all is leaving an assigned altitude. And this is the true differentiator between a pro pilot and a not pro pilot. You have to report leaving the assigned altitude. So if you're at 10,000, and they say climb flight level 180, your report back is not up to 180 for 12345. Your callback is leaving 10,000 for flight level 180 for Cessna 12345. So you have to report leaving the assigned altitude. Does that make sense?
It does.
Let me give you the place where this applies a lot. Let's say that you're in a M600 at flight level 280, okay? And they say pilot discretion descend and maintain 10,000. altimeter 3025. Then you want to stay at 280. Then you call them back and say discretion to 10,000 to 3028 or whatever the altimeter is. Now you can stay at 280
As long as you want.
as long as you want. You own that airspace down below you. But when you start down, what must you do?
Leaving 280 for 10,000.
There you go. And you don't even need to say the 10,000. You could just say Cessna or M600 12345 leaving 280. And that'll be Roger. And that will, I promise you, that little nuance, all the flight controllers know it. And that will completely separate you from the rookies. You know what I'm saying? Because you know you got to. So the point is, if a really good instrument pilot is going to know those additional reports and is going to have them memorized and just know what they are. So that you can't just change your airspeed. You can't be doing 200 knots and say, I'm going to fly at 150, because there might be other airplanes behind you and you're going to gum up the works with a big slope. So you got to know those additional reports.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So that's a good one.
I think if you just employ this discussion that we're having right here, that'll fix 95% of your radio calls. And then it's just a matter of just kind of cleaning up the mess from there and getting better at it and practicing it and fighting to do it right.
And what about bad habits? A lot of folks will get in the bad habit of saying with you or other excess words. They'll get in the bad habit of doing it wrong.
Let me give you a good one. The word "and." The people that go, and Cessna 12345 is blah, blah, blah. Don't do that. You don't have to have a preparatory statement or, and Cessna 12345.
Just taking up extra space.
And saying, I am a rookie, so you don't need to have, but like preparatory calls are being so fast that like you push brevity to where they can't even understand what you're saying. And certainly nobody else could understand what you're saying. I'll give you another one. The instrument pilot says, I'm at the initial approach fix for the GPS to runway 25, but the pattern's full. Well, those VFR guys don't know what the instrument approach fix is for the whatever, but to be able to say I'm 8 miles south inbound for landing,
right,
makes all. And then you could say I'm inbound on the instrument approach. If y'all could fit me in, it'd be great. In other words, now you're not bantering, but you're there. They know where you are, and it's not just this thing of where's that? What's an initial approach fix? And
especially in maybe IFR conditions at 3,000, overcast, where people can be VFR in the pattern, but
Correct.
You're coming out of the clouds and you've got to fit in.
That's right. That's it. And being more clear when you're coming into an airport, especially a non-towered airport, being more clear to the VFR pilots of who you are and where you are, so they have their situational awareness.
Right.
You need yours, they need theirs. You're going to do better when they know where you're at.
Right.
And so knowing those kind of things is going to be better. Cleaning up the radio talk and becoming more familiar with it. And then I got to say one thing. For all the people that are talking on 121.5, just shut up. All right? There's no meowing. There's none of that crap.
Yeah.
Just 121.5 is for emergencies. And I have used 121.5 many times, needed to, and I've helped a lot of people on 120. Don't.
Yeah, your radio could get, your knobs could stop working, and all of these radios have a quick button to get to.
That's right.
121.5.
That's right.
You hold the COM button on G1000, and it's going to go to 121.5 default.
And the other thing is that a pilot really should monitor 121.5 on their secondary radio. And when there's stupid conversation and meowing and just silliness, it comes because I'm listening to my primary radio.
Right.
But when I hear another thing, I attune to that, and my ears and my brain. Okay, I've got to now decipher, is that an important call? And when it's just nonsense, I may be in an important part of the conversation or an important part of flight, and that meowing or that whatever may be the thing that pulls my attention away for just that split second to get. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I've heard ATC, hey, any luck on guard? Can you get them on guard?
Oh yeah,
you hear it all the time of they can't get a hold of somebody, and
Guard is there for emergency stuff. Leave it for purely that.
That's it. Joe, I really enjoyed this talk on radio communications today. I think it's going to help a lot of people to get better at make sure they're doing the right thing, becoming professional. And I think a lot of people, that's what they're striving for.
Absolutely. Becoming good on the radios and comfortable on the radios, it's a mark of a professional pilot. Well, if today has been helpful for you, we'd love for you to subscribe to our channel. Check us out at the Malibu Guru podcast, or just Google KC Aviation. We're glad you're here, and we appreciate you being a part of all that we have going on.